The way you buy and sell real estate in the United States is about to change forever starting in mid-July. So why are these things changing and how is it going to impact both buyers and sellers? That's exactly what we're going to talk about on today's episode. So let's go ahead and get into it. So the National Association of Realtors just settled a months-long lawsuit around commission for $418 million. Now, as buyers and sellers, you probably have no idea what that is and don't care about it. However, what you should care about is what they also agreed to do because of this settlement. So they're basically now going to be taking the buyer's agent commission out of the MLS altogether. So the way it used to work is a seller would pay a selling agent a certain percentage of the sale, and then that selling agent would split that with a buying agent, basically a finder's fee for bringing a buyer to the property, and they would both get paid that way. So on the buyer side of things, the great part about that was you can go purchase a home, and typically in most cases, you had to have nothing out of pocket to have representation during the entire process. However, that is all about to change now. So what the commission lawsuit has done is it's basically decoupled the commissions. So now the seller is going to pay the selling agent and the buyer needs to pay for their buying agent. Now they did say that there's still room for negotiation, so the buyer and seller are still able to negotiate during escrow, and so the buyer could ask the seller to continue paying for the buyer's agent side of things, but there's no obligation to do so. So let's go ahead and actually go over what this means for both buyers and sellers, and let's start with buyers first. So buyers, especially those first-time home buyers that are short on cash, maybe just have enough for a down payment, you're gonna have a very hard time in this new type of market being able to get a home, because not only are you gonna have to bring in the down payment as well as closing costs, you're potentially on the hook for all the fees associated with using a real estate agent to help you out with that transaction as well. Now again, this is not a guarantee that you have to pay them. Every time you submit an offer, you're still able to ask the seller for some type of credit to be able to credit you back for closing costs, which you can then use to be able to help you pay for the agent that you're using. So we might see that happen in more cases than not, especially when this first rolls out. However, again, it's never a guarantee, and you don't know what that's going to be until you start negotiating with each individual seller, because it's going to be different with every single one of them. On top of that, if you're getting a loan for the property, right now the current loan rules really state that you can only have a certain amount of credit towards closing when you go and purchase a home. So even though someone might be willing to give you some money on the selling side of things to help pay for your agent, your lender might not be able to take that money and actually use it to help you pay for your agent. So there's going to be a lot of issues here, a lot of confusion as buyers trying to purchase homes once we get past July of this year. Okay, so buyers, you're basically going to have 4 different options when you go to purchase a home. So number 1, you can hire a professional agent that's going to walk you through the entire transaction, much like before. So they're going to go to the homes with you, tour them, show you some pros, cons, things to look out for, help you actually submit the offer, negotiate, and then go into escrow with the paperwork, the inspections, negotiating repair requests, all that kind of stuff. And again, basically use a real estate agent like the same way you would use one right now. The next option would be to hire a discount agent, or only to hire an agent to do some of the services for you. So either you're going to get subpar services, or maybe you're only asking them to do a certain amount of things. So submit the offer for you, and then you can take care of the rest, or submit the offer, help you with the paperwork, and then you go through and do the house hunting by yourself, do the inspections, all that kind of stuff by yourself. So there might be some range of options that you can choose from if you don't get a full service agent. The next option below that would be going in directly to the selling agent themselves. So that's called dual agency, basically where the selling agent is representing both the seller and you at the same time. I never like that. It's not a great idea when you're trying to have one person represent the best interest of the buyer and the seller at the same time. It's nearly impossible. And then the 4th option would be to represent yourself. So obviously not ideal. Most buyers are not going to want to do that, but it's always been an option, so it's still on the table. Now, the other requirement of this settlement is that if you are a buyer and you do want to work with an agent, you're going to need to sign a contract up front that goes over everything in terms of how much you're paying the agent, what services the agent is providing you, so everything is done up front before you start looking for homes. So that's a nationwide thing that you're going to need to do anytime you work with a buyer's agent, again, starting in July going forward. So as you can see, it's going to completely change the way buyers purchase homes inside the United States. There's going to be a lot more uncertainty involved. The buyer is going to need to be able to bring in a lot more cash if they want professional representation. And overall, it's going to be, unfortunately, a very bad bad outcome for any buyers, especially those that are low on cash and just don't have enough money saved up to be able to cover everything that's now going to be involved with purchasing a home. Now, on the selling side of things, there's definitely a lot less consequences when this new ruling takes effect, because really right now, when you go and meet with an agent to be able to sell your home, you're already going through a negotiating commission as it is. So really the biggest difference for you is that you're going to be negotiating the seller's agent commission, and then you and the selling agent are going to discuss what you would like to do as a marketing strategy in terms of if you want to compensate the buyer at all to be able to help them out with closing costs. So you're still able to, as a seller, put into the MLS stating that I am offering X dollar amounts for this buyer to go towards closing costs. And one, that's going to allow buyers to see exactly how much you're going to give them up front, as well as give them more confidence that if they're going to tour your home, they're going to be able to actually afford to place an offer on it, because they know up front what the closing costs are going to involve if they're using an agent to purchase the house. Now, if you and the agent decide that you don't want to offer any type of closing cost credit to the buyer, the other option that you really need to be prepared for is that most of the offers you have coming in, most buyers are going to be asking probably from 1.5% to 3% closing cost credit to be able to help them out so they can afford to use a buyer's agent. So that's something to expect when you get offers coming in come the middle of July. Now, obviously this is a brand new ruling, so there's still a lot of confusion, a lot of clarity that needs to come out around all of this to figure out exactly how transactions are going to work. However, I wanted to give you some insight based on what I think is going to happen once these things start to take effect. So let's go ahead and start with the lending side of things first. So like I mentioned before, right now when a buyer goes to get a loan, so based on the type of the loan as well as the down payment amount, there is going to be a set percentage that the seller is going to be able to credit a buyer before the lender can no longer make that work. So if you look at this chart right up here, it will basically go through the different type of loan programs as well as down payments and show you exactly what that percentage is. So let's say, for instance, you're a first-time home buyer, you're putting less than 10% down, and you're using a conventional loan. Right now, you can get a maximum of 3% of closing cost credits from the seller. So if you're using a professional real estate agent and they're going to charge you, let's say 2%, 2.5% to be able to use them to purchase your home, and on top of that, you're asking for additional seller credits maybe to help buy down your interest rate, or there was a repair that needs to be done and the seller's giving you credit for that, you can see that you're easily going to be able to get up to that 3% max. And at that max, you can't go over that max dollar amount unless you go into a different loan program. So for instance, maybe you get transitioned into an FHA loan because they have a higher amount of 6% right now. And so you go to that type of loan to be able to get the closing cost credit to make it work for you. So there's going to be some loan program switching based on these new rules, I have a feeling, as well as how much the seller is willing to compensate the buyer when they purchase the home. Now, what I think might happen in the future is Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac will understand, especially for first-time home buyers, that these percentages maybe don't make sense anymore based on the new rules. So they might update that and actually increase those percentages so that wouldn't be as big of an issue anymore. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that happen sometime in the next year. So on top of that, there might be another way they can also help out buyers to be able to afford to get a buyer's agent when they're purchasing a home. So right now, you can't put the buyer's agent commission as part of the mortgage, but they might change that. To help out first-time home buyers, there might be a certain percent of the population that they might make an exception for, where they actually allow the buyer's agent fees to be part of the mortgage, and that way it's spread out over 30 years. The buyer's not paying for it up front. They're just paying a certain dollar amount each month to be able to have that full representation without having to have the money in the bank account to start their home buying journey. Now, another thing I wouldn't be surprised to see a big push for, especially in California where it's still legal, because there are a lot of states where it's not anymore, is to get rid of dual agency. So again, dual agency is where one person represents both the seller and the buyer at the same time. And like I said, I don't like it. I don't think it's a good idea. It's pretty much impossible to be able to represent 100% of the best interests of the seller as well as 100% of the best interest of the buyer at the same time going through transaction. When money's involved, negotiations are involved, it's extremely difficult to do so. So I would be happy to see dual agency go away in California. It might be an unpopular opinion around real estate agents, But again, I have no problem seeing that disappear. And if it does disappear, that might give an added incentive to sellers to continue compensating buyers for closing costs to help them out with paying agent commission fees. So another consequence of this ruling coming down is I have a feeling you're going to see compensation between sellers and buyers vary pretty widely depending on the type of market that we're in, even more so than we're already seeing. So for instance, right now, Orange County is in a pretty hot seller's market, so sellers have more power. So most likely, you're going to see sellers offer a little bit less in terms of closing cost credit to buyers right now. So buyers that are already having a hard time getting into a home right now are going to get even less help when they're trying to purchase that home when we're in a seller's market. But on the other side of things, if we ever go into a buyer's market, you're most likely going to have to see sellers increase the amount of closing cost credit they're willing to give, because buyers are going to want to be able to use professional real estate agents and be able to get that full service, and they're going to have the negotiating power to do so. So when we are in a buyer's market, most likely you're going to see sellers pay a little bit more than they have been in order to be competitive, get their home into escrow, and get it closed. Another thing that I could see happening, which I've already heard some people talk about already, is that buying agents offering different packages. So maybe they have a full service package, or again, they're offering exactly what they do right now, start to finish, full service, everything you need to be able to purchase a home confidently. But then maybe for a 0.5% less, they're not gonna go on the home tours with you, but when you're ready to place an offer, they'll help you place the offer, help walk you through escrow all the way to the end. And then maybe for a 0.5% less than that, they'll help you write the offer, and then you're kind of on your own with everything else. So I have a feeling you'll start seeing some unique compensation structures and packages put together by buyer's agents, depending on what a buyer wants. And that might be overall good for buyers, because for some reason maybe you don't want that full service from start to finish and you only need help on a certain part of it. Then you're going to have a little bit more options in front of you to be able to reduce the amount of money you have to spend in order for you to purchase a home. Now buyers, I know this is a lot of depressing news, but ultimately I do still think that it's in the seller's best interest to offer some type of compensation to the buyer, whether it's closing cost credits or whether they're negotiating back and forth to be able to help pay for their agent at least partially, because that's how sellers are going to get the most amount of eyeballs in their property, which is going to result in the most amount of offers, multiple offer situations leading to bidding wars, ultimately leading to the best price possible and walking away with the most amount of money in their pocket. Now, there are going to be sellers out there that might want to offer nothing up front and then negotiate it case by case, which will also happen. However, sellers, you also want to look at it through the buyer's lens. If a buyer sees a property and 3 out of 4 of them are offering, let's say $10,000 to help with closing costs, and one of them is not, which houses do you think those buyers are going to tour first? Because they're getting help out with closing cost credit. If other sellers are offering those type of credits and you're not, even if you're willing to maybe negotiate once you get into escrow, there's going to be a lot of buyers that won't even look at your house because you're not competitive in the market. So it will be interesting to see what type of offers sellers are going to offer to buyers and where the average is going to be based on that. If sellers are not within that average, they're going to lose traction on their home and ultimately reduce the amount of money they're getting on it. So even though sellers have no obligation to pay anything to the buyer or the buyer's agent, I do believe there will be a lot of compromises involved to make sure the seller is getting the most amount of eyeballs and offers on their properties and making sure that they're not turning buyers away just because they're not offering a competitive compensation. Okay, so let's go ahead and wrap this up with a bow for you. So on the selling side of things, I do believe you're going to see seller fees start to come down a little bit, which is great news for sellers. Now on the agent side of things, I also believe you're going to see a lot of part-time agents exit the industry altogether because it's going to get a lot more competitive. The buyer's agents that hang around are going to have to show a lot of value to the buyers because now buyers are potentially on the hook to paying for that service, so they need to make sure that they're at the top of their game. Now, I still believe that in general, most buyers want to have that representation, want to be walked through the entire process, have someone looking out for their legal best interest, their financial best interest, making sure they're going through escrow and getting a home that's not going to have a bunch of problems and they're not getting ripped off with. I know that buyers want that representation and most of them are still going to be willing to pay for it. So I still think there is a place for buyer's agents in the market, but as an industry, the buyer agents that are able to show a lot of value are just going to get paid better because they're helping the clients better, which again, I don't think is a bad thing for the industry. I think overall for the real estate industry, it's good to weed out some of those agents that aren't very good and really you're left with much better better agents in general. So overall, even though a lot of agents are against this, I do think in the long run, this will be a good thing for the real estate industry. Now, on the buying side of things, unfortunately, buyers are definitely the ones that are going to get hurt most from these new rulings. So there's no way about it. Buyers who didn't have to pay for representation the majority of the time before and got that full service experience are now going to, at best, have to negotiate with the seller to be able to get some type of selling credit to be able to cover their buyer's agent fee, or at least part of it. And at worst, if they want a really good real estate agent to help them through the transaction, they're going to have to pay a premium for that, and that's going to have to come out of their pockets. Or hopefully down the line, if there's some type of loan restructuring, you're going to be able to find a way to do that without having it come immediately out of your pocket. So buyers, especially those first-time home buyers or ones without a lot of cash on hand, are by far the ones getting hurt the worst with this. If you have an investor that's all cash or someone that has a lot of money, it's not going to impact them as much because they can afford the best type of agent to be able to help them out if they want that full service. So again, it's not hurting all buyers equally. It's definitely hurting those that are first-time home buyers the most, which is by far the outcome that I like the least about this new ruling. Now, like I said before, this ruling just came out, so things might continue to change over the next couple months. This is not fully approved yet. It still has to go through the federal courts, even though it's likely to be approved. So it's not fully approved. It might take a few months to go through that process. However, again, everybody in our industry is pretty much operating like this is going to be approved because there really isn't anything stopping it at this point, even as it goes through federal court. So if you're a buyer or a seller thinking of purchasing a home in the back half of this year or going forward, you definitely need to understand the way that real estate is changing, and so that way you're not surprised when you go to purchase or sell a home after the middle of July. Now, if you do want to stay updated with all the changes happening as things progress over the next couple months, make sure you don't forget to hit that subscribe and follow button. I'll be putting updates out here if there's any new information that you need to know about. And if you are a first-time home buyer that is looking for some type of assistance, if you want to check out this video right here that I just did, the Biden administration announced a bunch of new housing proposals that they're trying to push through right now. So if you want to learn more about that, check out that video. So until next week, stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you on the next show. Bye, everybody.